So you got a diesel truck, early 90s, late 80s, keeps running out of fuel at a quarter tank. You can't figure out why. Well, this is why. This is the original sender. And if you'll notice, it is missing the shower head over here. This piece right here has long since crumbled, fell off, and now there's a gap about that long between this and the bottom of the tank. So there's your answer. So basically, I just had to replace this because in taking my tank off, it actually broke off one of the return lines. So at this point, I've replaced this. It came with a new lock ring and gasket. And in doing so, I was like, you know what? Why don't I just go ahead and go to a 38-gallon tank? And basically, this is what they look like on the inside. Nice and clean. Tank costed me about 170 bucks off of Amazon. The sending unit costed me about $85. So I'm about $250 into this. Now, instead of a sump, I went with the 6AN to these fuel disconnect setup. So it'll still draw off the top, just like a normal factory setup. So if I ever had to go to a regular tank again, I wouldn't have to do anything special other than drop the old tank, put the new one in, good to go. So this is what your sending unit, it looks like when it's actually put in. I do not have a lock ring or anything, it's just mocked up. But you basically have your 3/8 sending line, 5/16 return, and then you have your fuel gauge wiring, which is in this case 2-prong, basically a ground and a positive. Just wanted to throw out that I slipped the new shower head off. It literally just basically fell off my hand. Put a new compression fitting on, and this is the copper tube that came with the tank that I got. I did have to cut this end off, so I just took a cut-off wheel, cut right there, and then evened it up as good as I could. And then after I got it all tightened down, cinched up, I basically put my mouth here, put my finger over the end there, and then sucked as hard as I possibly could to see if there would be any air intrusion, and so far, none. So I should be good to go. So this fuel sending unit's ready to install now. I already tested it, as you can see earlier. The new fuel arm literally sits about that far from the bottom of the tank. If you smack the tank up and down, it will actually touch. So without fuel, it shouldn't touch. And this tube, it goes all the way down to the 4-inch by 4-inch square in the bottom where the sump would normally go. So now I should not have any problems. All right, so everything's in. I'm holding it in place. Dry fitting before I just slam it all together. And you can see that my float is right on the bottom, as well as you can see the pickup tube actually kind of extends down into that little tiny 4x4 square there. So now I just gotta pull it all apart and solder the end of it on. Okay, quick update on this. The other bolts, as I showed you, were about 2.5 inches too short. Even with the tank pressed as far up as it would go, wasn't working. So I went and got some 3/8 all thread, about 1 foot long, and basically just made bolts. Now this is supposed to have these pipe spacers in there, but I didn't have extra cash on hand to do it, so we're just going to do it without it. In worst case scenario, I can always come in, add it later, and just undo this one corner at a time, slide it on, bolt it back together. So this is an issue a lot of people has with this modification is once you get the tank, because it hangs down so much further, you can't really get to these bolts for your receiver hitch, which if you're going to do this, I highly suggest you go ahead and take your receiver hitch completely off the truck, and it just opens up a lot. You can always put it on later, but at any rate, basically, and don't worry about this wire just goes from my reverse lights that I've got under my bumper. But basically, yeah, I've got everything in. The only thing that's left to do is install the straps and to reinstall the filler neck up to the fender where you can pour fuel in, and then run my fuel lines all the way to the front and install them. Okay, so I had a conundrum. I don't have a good way to explain this other than this is 5/16 inch inside diameter fuel rated line. This was a return line that came off the back of my engine. This line side I want to leave as 5/16 so it fits back on the return system, and that way that I don't have an issue there. Put a little clamp on it and good to go. This side, if you notice, it's a lot more pliable. I took a 3/8 drill bit, gently stuck it in there, and let it drill out the inner side to inside of it. Got rid of that inner liner so that it would fit up onto this AN fitting, this barb fitting here. So now once I put this together, it'll not leak and I won't have a problem. So this is what it actually looks like once it's all done. I wish I could get it a little further down, but I guess with a little bit more patience I could get it, but I've pulled and pulled on it and I can't get it to pull back. Two barbs are fully engaged, so it's not just going to rip out, but it's got a 6 AN to 3/8 barb fitting with a piece of 5/16 hose stripped out and then pressed over those barbs so that it now is an adapter. So now all I got to do is put this back into my 3/8 fuel line to make the return lines, slide this up back to where it was, put the clamp on and go. So at this point, every system part is new except for my filter head, the hard line that goes from the filter head to the injector pump, hard lines, and then injectors. That's the only thing that's not new. Tank, send, and return lines is all new, using PTFE 3/8 line for send and return, as well as 6 AN fittings. And this piece here will be used later on as a stopgap from down there up here, because I had cut the line for the pump to be down there, not up here, because I was going to go with a mechanical fuel pump, but it didn't happen, so here we are. So now the Facet fuel pump will have to be mounted right over here, such as this, and it'll have 6 AN fitting to 3/8 line down to my new fuel line, and a 1/8 inch MPT to 6 AN fitting to a 6 AN fitting 3/8 line over to this 6 AN fitting, and then boom, all sealed, nice and neat, no leaks. I'll have all new line. Now I had already previously gotten this fuel line off the same buddy because my hard line from the pump up here to the filter head had broken. So he had this piece made up for his setup, and then he went to a full e-fuel setup and then didn't need it, so I got it off of him, pre-made, saved me time and hassle, and away I went up until my return lines got torn up. So now, at this point, every system on this part of so basically at this point, I got fed up with the manual fuel pump setup, not priming, not doing what it's supposed to do, even with 2 new ones put in. So a buddy of mine gave me this Facet Duralift pump. They're about 160 bucks. And on a factory IDI or even a factory turboed IDI, they'd be fine. Anything more than that, such as stage 1 injectors or a 90cc pump or above, you're definitely going to need more than this pump to flow. But as it is, it'll run for the factory DB2 Stanodyne pumps.